Welcome to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that looks at various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. Today's guest, costume designer Shirley Kurata, joins us to talk about their work on Everything Everywhere All at Once. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode, so make yourself comfortable as we jump into the conversation with Shirley. Hi, Shirley. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm very excited that you got back to me and you could squeeze me in before you head off and everything. And yeah, I just appreciate that you made the time for me.
My pleasure.
So we're here to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once. I usually start off from the beginning of like how the project comes to you, but I think with the film having so much success and everything that's come from that, how have you found the reception of the movie?
I have been so utterly delighted and so happy that it's doing so well. I'm actually very surprised by the reception because, when I first read the script, I was expecting it to be a little bit polarizing, like how Swiss Army Man was. I was like, this is a great film, but I don't know if everyone's going to understand it or appreciate it. And I think thanks to the amazing acting and, the work of the Daniels in making it resonate with so many people and really affect them in such a positive way, I think that they did such a remarkable job with that it's been so well received by so many people.
I just think the whole reception of the film has been incredible, and the way that it speaks to people on so many different levels. So it's not just a fun, wacky sort of concept, but also it digs deep into those. It digs deep into sort of family trauma and also like growing up with certain type of parents, because I'm a child of immigrant parents, so it kind of spoke to me at certain points as well, with how Evelyn would speak to Joy at times, or just how things would be with the granddad as well. It's the same with like my grandma, where you sort of, so there's just so much to that, and then there's also just layers to understanding what people are going through, and I guess how Wayman says, like, just be kind.
Yeah, yeah. I think it, it really resonated with a lot of, children of immigrant parents because there's several disconnects. There's sometimes a language disconnect, which is what I dealt with being Japanese American. And, my parents spoke Japanese in the house, but their English wasn't so good. And so it's hard for me to have very deep conversations with them. And so there's like a language disconnect, but there's also a generational disconnect. And I think, that's something that's experienced by many people. And the sort of like trauma that gets sort of passed along as well, especially for, the like people that are queer or just different from the sort of world and lifestyle that their parents grew up in. The way I was raised, which was, I was born and raised in the US. My upbringing was so much different from the upbringing of my parents. So there's definitely a disconnect there. But I think ultimately, there's a story of just family and sort of the importance of that connection, and it might not always be a biological family, it could also be, a family that you've created for yourself. And just those moments are what kind of gets us through this crazy world, which at times can be very overwhelming and, hard to take on. So I think, the message is like much needed now too, because so much has happened, so much is happening. And I think a lot of us feel very overwhelmed. We shot this pre-pandemic, so we didn't even know what was to come after shooting it, and no idea that this pandemic would happen, that we would be in lockdown for so many months, wars, shootings. It's just so overwhelming at times. And, I think people needed just a movie to just sort of, I think that Daniels described it as like getting a hug, giving a hug to you, to just say, hey, we hear you.
Yeah, that's true. And it is like a really nice warm hug that
Yeah.
embraces you throughout the film. And I guess also it's like the decision for a mother to sort of fight for the good of her child and be like, actually, no, there's always good in people. You just have to sort of find it, help them find it, or get a way to sort of get it out of each other. I guess we could go to the beginning. Is that how did the project come about, and what made you want to take this project on?
Well, I worked with producer Jonathan Wong, who I worked with working on various commercials with director Aaron Rule. And Jonathan Wong produced a lot of the Daniels projects, like, Turn Down for What, and a bunch of their music videos and short films. And I guess they had reached out to Jonathan because they were looking for a costume designer. So Jonathan thought of me. And when he asked me, I was just like, yes, sign me up. I mean, I didn't have to even read the script because I knew that coming from them, it would be unconventional. It would be just different and really interesting. And I was already familiar with Swiss Army Men at that point, and so I was like, okay, they're not going to make a normal film. And so I was like, yes, sign me up.
I think it'd be if you, after watching Swiss Army Man, I think everybody would be slightly complete 180 if they did like an Oscar bait drama about something completely different. But it's funny how you make those contacts who kind of keep you in mind from when you've been working on previously, but also having that collaboration from before. I guess you kind of know what to expect when you're walking in, and discussions that you can have with the directors on what sort of vision they want to go for and what they want to do. But I guess when you're with a film like this, which jumps between so many different universes and different setups and different timelines, where do you even begin when it comes to your research, designing, executing ideas? And with the film being a moderate budget / low budget, is there a lot of buying involved in creating the looks, or do you just make the outfits from scratch?
Okay, well, I mean, the initial process is just having a conversation with the director, so like, with the Daniels, and they had already put together a list of movies to sort of watch or revisit. Also, they had like wardrobe reference boards that they had made. They also had even like just like a philosophical mind dump, which they was just like a PDF of just like quotes by like Stanley Kubrick, Carl Sagan, Kurt Vonnegut, Maya Angelou, and it was all sort of more in to sort of show the spirit of the movie. So drawing upon the list of movies they recommended, I kind of dove into that and just sort of watched as much as I could, particularly like because I wasn't too well versed with the sort of like Hong Kong cinema and like the action films that have come out of there. I mean, obviously I've seen like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Shaolin Soccer, Kung Fu Hustle, but I wanted to, sort of dig a little deeper. And so, I tried watching some of the earlier like Stephen Chow films. I really like his films because he used characters that were very like atypical of like a martial artist. Sometimes they were just like, a little bit heavier, or like just an older woman, with rollers in their hair. And I like that aspect because I kind of felt like, Waymond and Evelyn were both characters that were kind of like that. They're not who you would expect to be badass martial artists. I also, looked at like blogs. There were a couple of blogs that I really liked. One's called Chinatown Pretty, which is like Asian senior citizens in Chinatown that had really cool outfits. There was also like the Accidental Asian Hipster. Again, like just moms and dads and grandpas dressed just like hipsters, but unintentionally. Um, and
Sorry.
Yeah. And then also just like Pinterest, just art books. It's, I dug into so many different mediums and sort of put together boards based off of each character. And also, like, the first important thing too is to break down the script, right? And sort of like figure out, like, okay, there's how many changes with each character. And this script, though, was probably one of the most difficult scripts to break down. I mean, just watching it, it's already dense, right? But can you imagine on paper? It was really hard because it wasn't just like a just sort of natural flow. There were so many like quick cuts and jumps, and within one scene, like Jobu would change, so many times. And so I had to sort of like ask the Daniels like a million questions, like, in this scene, like, what world is this, and like, do they change for this? And so they were really patient with me, and from there I kind of, to the best of my knowledge, sort of broke it down. And you kind of have to do a budget breakdown and sort of figure out how much you had for each character. And for this, the budget wasn't very big. Let's just say that the budget for the entire movie for wardrobe was probably less than one Marvel like superhero costume. And there were, like quite a few costumes. And, there were actually, costumes that got cut that we shot. And it was really dense. So I would have loved to have made more things from scratch, but I just didn't have the budget for it. I did make a few things. I had to sort of figure out, okay, I have the budget to make a few things. What's it, what look will I, do that for? And other outfits, I just had to sort of like piece together, mix rentals with like stuff that's shopped, borrow outfits from designers. I had to be super resourceful. But I think that, I like the Daniels. I did a lot of music videos back in the day, and a lot of the times the budgets were really small. And so I've learned to sort of work off of very minimal budgets and try to make it look as good as possible. And I think the Daniels understood that. And they had even told me too from the get-go, like, listen, we might ask for something that might be hard for you to get, or, we don't have the time to get it. Just let us know. And, we could come up with, an alternative that would work, like, don't be afraid. They were very open to that. And I think that was really great. And I really appreciated that, because there were at times moments where I was like, listen, I don't have the budget to do this. Or like the Elvis costume, we were, I think, maybe gonna have her get shot, in that. And I was like, I don't know if we have the budget to, have multiple ones, because I would have to have at least four or five Elvis suits, and those are really expensive. And so then we, decided, okay, well, why don't we see what we can get, and, have her change into another look, because she can change whenever she wants. So yeah, it was sort of like a kind of a mix of purchased and built costumes.
It's kind of crazy to think when you see a film like this that there are moments where the costume must change 3 or 4 times within a space of maybe less than 30 seconds. I think a big one is when Joy gets introduced in her coming out with a pig in the lift, and then cutting to another outfit, cutting to the golf outfit. And that, again, that must have been a scheduling nightmare in terms of getting ready for each look and getting that done on time, and then making sure it matched the shot before where they're in something else and different sort of thing. But it seems like there's a lot of sort of borrowing, asking for favors and everything, but even having that collaborative discussion of like, well, if you can't do it, don't worry, let's get something else.
Yeah.
And having that sort of openness as well probably made your job a lot easier. They didn't need to stress about something else.
Yes, most definitely. I think like we share the same aesthetic in the sense that if it looks almost too polished, it's not always the best choice. Like sometimes, obviously like with the Bluetooth headsets, it's like it's kind of a little bit more funny, interesting. I don't know what you call it, but like when it's a little bit dated or off or a little bit more budget. And so I think that, part of it for, I think for all the departments is that, we did what we could to make it interesting, but also though like relatable because it wasn't so overly polished. I think that it was something that like could be crafted or just like come from like this real world. I don't know. There were just like a lot of elements though that like I think led to the charm of the film in that it was a little bit more budget, but in a relatable way.
Yeah, I think as well adding, because you always need to break the costumes down to make sure that they lived it. If they're costumes that are used for sort of more than a number of scenes, you still need to break them down to make sure that they're lived in, and
Yeah.
you don't want to look like it's just come off the rack. You need to, it just won't look right. But then it's the little aesthetics that you're mentioning, like the Bluetooth headset that if this was sort of a big sci-fi film, it would be like a shiny watch of some sort that
Yeah.
would then illuminate, and then you can see all the possibilities and everything. And then you have the green screen area, this, that, the other. But I guess with having like the Bluetooth aesthetic, it's just something simple because it's a way of communicating. You can plug in, you're like basically plugging yourself in a way. What was quite striking about the film as well is like the colors that are used for outfits. And it feels like color throughout the whole film is very important. It's not just, but it's also in the production design, in the hair and makeup, but also
Mhm.
in the costumes. With certain films, the big bad and other characters always have a certain color palette that they'll wear. I think it's might be this. It stays the same with people like Evelyn Wayman and the grandfather because they're the center of everything. But when you have somebody like Jobu, where in like a conventional film, I guess you could say, is that they would have a very dark color palette, or they would be wearing black. You'd have to show them off. This is the bad person. This is the bad guy.
Mhm.
You shouldn't be rooting for them. But like, like how did you decide on the sort of colors that you wanted to use? And then did you want to create a specific theme for each universe as well?
Yeah, I mean, initially, like, the Daniels sort of, we all had a meeting, with all the department heads and Larkin about talking about the color scheme for each universe. And some universes it was more in the production design, others was more through how it was shot, and some of it was in the costumes. For me, I just knew that with Jobu, because she changed so quickly within a scene, that it was important that we saw the changes. And she's like, her character would have fun with her outfits, and so I wanted to make sure that each look was really distinctive from each other and kind of like represented a sort of character that she just felt like playing, whether it was like the sort of K-pop star to the Elvis costume to like a sort of luchador pro wrestler. I think just wearing like a dark, ominous look would just be just too boring for her. In terms of like the other worlds, I like the hot dog universe, I suggested to the Daniels, like, well, why don't we have the characters all in sort of hot dog colors? So like tans, beiges, like mauve, dusty pinks. And that's where Jason Kisvarde, who's our production designer, I think he played off of that world too. So that the whole set, everything is just very beige. And I felt that that was like sort of a fun take on that world. And we had like the Alphaverse universe, which we thought that color palette would be more like in those sort of browns, olives, oranges, kind of like reflecting that sort of dystopian world that you would see maybe like in like Fifth Element or like Mad Max. So what I did there was I got a bunch of like vintage military uniforms, and I had it reconstructed into sort of like different like pieces, jumpsuits and stuff like that. And the bagel universe, we wanted to keep it all white because it just had a very sort of like ethereal, almost like church-like, a little bit culty air to it. And like other worlds, like I think were more based off of how it was shot. So like, the alleyway scene with Waymond and Evelyn, was inspired by Wong Kar-wai. And so that was maybe more in the sort of lighting, and the richness of the colors came out that way. So yeah, I think like color for me is really important in my costume design. I think it's really important to sort of like tell a story through color, and it sort of unifies things in some way, or it just sort of accentuates the character. I don't know, like there's different ways of telling a story through the costumes, but I think color for me is like sort of the most important.
It's interesting points that you make about like telling color through characters. But I think the jump, because you have, I guess, with each universe, you see the sort of different Evelyns. So you would see in the normal universe, her being in sort of reds and like they're darker colors, I guess, in a way they are sort of showing her in a way that not depressed, but I'd say unhappy with everything. It just all doesn't fit well. It all has that sort of sad look to it. But then you jump to the Wong Kai universe, which is, I think that's my favorite sort of setting and design and everything, just because it just, chef's
Yeah.
kiss. Everybody just looks incredible. It just looks smooth and suave. And then when you go to even to the Rakakuni universe, where you have the chef's outfits, they just look pristine. There's a sense of air of respect for oneself with them having it on and everything. And I think there's one person who jumps through each universe that you don't, well, there might be two, sorry if I'm mistaken, but the auditor played by Jamie Lee Curtis, it feels like her costume doesn't change that much other than when they're in the hot dog universe. So she's always in that very snazzy yellow, that cream white cardigan that looks like she's knitted herself. And I don't know, it says a lot about her, I think, in terms of just, this is somebody who wants to be happy, but is always sort of just like the bearer of bad news.
Yes, exactly. And I think that, she's all business. So like, I don't think she is concerned about like wearing, for her, function is more important. Function and comfort is more important than being fashionable or trying to show off her personality. And so I thought that like, I wanted to kind of keep her a little bit reined in. So like even the hot dog universe, it's a version of her IRS. She's actually wearing the same vest, but it's just in a beige color as opposed to the sort of yellow color. And so I think that that's her character. Whereas Evelyn, because she gets thrown into so many different worlds, she can change so many looks. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of quick cuts with her. So I wanted to make sure that you would see the different outfits and know that, it was a different universe with each outfit.
As well, you were mentioning before, when you're working with different heads of departments, you mentioned about the hot dog universe and how collaborating with the production designer on the color and style. There's also, I think your outfits work quite well in tandem with like the hair and makeup design. So I guess if you go for the bagel outfit, you'll see Jobu with her hair done in a certain way, her looks in a certain way. Or even when Jobu is first introduced with the sort of plaid costume where you're not necessarily seeing much of her, so there wouldn't be much of design, but the fact like her nails and everything have done a different color. I do love the introduction of Jobu and the outfit that she's wearing, the sort of plaid look. And I think I've read in an interview that it was very heavily inspired by Vivienne Westwood. But how do you work in tandem with these other departments in terms of like that you want to make sure that you're complementing each other's work and not overshadowing each other?
Yeah. Well, I think, we had all had inspiration boards. Michelle Chung, who did makeup, and then Anissa Salazar, who did hair, they also had made boards and kind of showed each other that. But ultimately after the fitting and what we decided, okay, this is what they're going to wear. I would like instantly send them images of that, because I think it was important for them to see that, so that they can sort of be inspired by and figure out what makeup would and hair would be best for that. And so, like for example, the plaid look, Anissa, when she saw it, she's like, "Oh, it would be cool if she had a little bit of green, because there was a lot of green in her outfit. If I put like a little bit of green in her hair." So there were things that did develop after seeing the fitting photos. I also at times like they would have an image that was like really cool, like a bagel hairstyle. And so I was in the process of like still making the costume. And so I wanted to make sure that whatever I would create for Jobu for the bagel universe, like the hair, it didn't impede with the hair. And so, I had wanted her to wear something that seemed very regal. And, I was thinking like a Elizabethan collar would be really cool, but like done in a sci-fi way. So I had one made, but we did have to do a few hair like tests with the hair, just to make sure that it didn't impede. And I had told Michelle too, like I'm planning on adding a lot of pearls to this costume, so it could be really cool to integrate that into her makeup. So I went ahead and actually purchased some like pearls that she could apply, and let her kind of create what she thought would work best with the costume. So it was more like, we definitely had conversations, but I also let them decide, what would be best with the outfit. I didn't really assert too much of my opinion in how the hair and makeup should be, because I fully trusted them to know what would be best for that. And also again, for time reasons too, because it was a very ambitious shoot, and I know like hair and makeup takes quite a while. They had to also make something that was doable within the time frame, especially if we had different looks within a day.
I think as well, when if you're working and collaborating, that you is the nice sort of ending of that is that you left each other alone to sort of not interfere with each other's ideas, and the sort of the outcome of it is, or the end product, should I say, sorry, looks incredible, with both both the hair and makeup design complementing the costumes, and just how well they work together and how they look as well. But even though you could have had the fittings and testing stage as well, and sort of bouncing off each other from that, being like, oh, that looks cool, and sort of going from there. There's something I'm quite curious about as well, because it's a very stunt heavy film with fighting sequences. When this sort of stunt work comes into play, do you change the way that you want to design an outfit, or how it's going to be used in terms of like the movement of the stunt performer, and like how much more durable it must be to sort of take hits and flips and everything like that?
Well, just a little tidbit about myself. In my earlier days as like a set costumer, I worked on a TV show called The Power Rangers. And it was like sort of like my first few years into costuming. And so I wanted to learn, the whole process of being, on set. And it was a very stunt heavy show. And there was generally like the second unit was all stunts, and I was often on that unit. And I learned all about wire work, squibs, pyro effects, it was all like kind of practical. It wasn't like, of course they had like some CGI after, but there was a lot of practical work done with the stunts. And so, I learned that like it had to be allow for movement, but also very durable, because they're doing these crazy stunts and like things just fall apart. So it was kind of a really good sort of crash course for me to understand the whole process of stunt work. And so whenever I do a fitting and I know that there's going to be a lot of stunts involved, I always make sure, I always ask, the actor, like, can you move around in this? Are you comfortable? are you able to do your stunts? And I even have them sort of like do some moves, and they're like, yeah, this is great. It's important that like there's either some stretch involved. Also, you have to, for when they're wearing a harness for the wire work, you know, you have to get like a slightly bigger size. You have to get multiples. You know, if they get like hurt, like scratched, whatever, you know, that you have to allow for the continuity of it. So I knew that with this, like I would have to get at least like 8 of the same wardrobe pieces for like Michelle, for Evelyn, Deirdre, and Waymond, just because I just knew that there was going to be a lot of like wire work involved. And we also had stunt doubles, and we also had sort of like body doubles. So at times, you know, we had 3 people in the same costume. So there was a lot of taking that into consideration, but then, you know, also like it was a little bit tricky because of the budget. So I had to make sure that like, you know, I was able to get multiples of this and also not blow out my budget. But thankfully, because their outfits were so like kind of everyday, mundane, I was able to get their outfits rather cheaply. And to me, I always like to think about what, like, where would this character shop? You know, where would they go? And so for Waymond and Evelyn, I was like, they would probably shop in Chinatown. And, you know, the clothes are very inexpensive, and it's, you know, made to fit an Asian body. And I think that that's where they would go. So that's pretty much what I did. And like for Deirdre, you know, I think she would like find some little like boutique by her house that's like all sort of like comfort wear, you know, and just like had a purse with like cats on it and just sort of so like I just wanted to make sure that it just seemed believable that what they were wearing is like something that that character would buy.
So I remember watching the aliens behind the scene making of that, and how James Cameron used to drum into how the Marines outfits should be made, and they were having people run and then crash into a wall as they're going around the corners and everything, and then it would fall apart, and then they'll have to go back to designing it and everything. So it's quite interesting to hear the sort of extents and how much extent that you need to go through to create the same look, but with 3 to 4 different people, and how there's so much more involved in it as well in terms of the planning logistics, that if they're going to have the main cast here, but then cut it to a stunt double, then cut it to another double, it must get so confusing with continuity as well, being like, this is
Yes.
this is that, what, wait a second, that's the wrong one, that's the stunt doubles, that's this person's. But I do like the idea as well that, so the Power Rangers thing, as anybody of my age, I was a massive fan when I was younger. Used to collect the toys, used to watch it all the time. My godson now is into Power Rangers, so I found it as a way to sort of connect with him as well. But it's just so funny and interesting to hear that you worked on it, and that something that you worked on is come back to help you out so much with this film. So it's come like in a weird full circle way, and like understanding what is needed with the stunt performers and everything.
Well, you know, you know, Wayman said every failure, every disappointment has led you to this moment, you know, because there were times where I've worked on just like, you know, it's very low budget, like terrible like movies or shows but I felt like, you know, I don't regret that because I learned so much from it. And yes, I would have liked to have worked on, you know, a big movies that were like amazing and stuff like that. But, you know, I just didn't have the sort of resources to be able to do that. So I just took what I could and, you know, worked for pennies, just learning the process. But it did lead me to this point where you kind of have to think on your feet at times, like, oh, I didn't plan for this. What do I do? You know, and also just like, how do I make this work with this budget or with, you know, how do I make this work with the little time that I have? So, you know, everything sort of happens for a reason. And people who are in a, you know, a position that with work or whatever, where they're unhappy, it's like, well, sometimes what you get from it and what you learn from it could lead to something better down the line. So I do believe that sometimes you have to tough it out and make the most out of it.
It's very sort of like profound because it's just, again, we do sort of jobs where you were saying as well, where you were taking it and it is such a poignant way as well by quoting the film, was saying every failure's led up to this moment, but then it's like, as you said, the only it may have been a failure at the time, but there's what you take away from it and how you sort of take those trials and tribulations of it all and put it into your armory to make sure that you, for example, yourself, like a better costume designer and or stylist in sort of, and build from that. But it's just it is very poignant because of everything that's happening as well. I'm still sort of also trying to revel in the Power Rangers things. It's just like, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to someone who was working on the stuff that I used to love when I was a youngster. Just to sort of, as we're leading up to wrapping up, what was your favorite costume to design?
I would have to say Jobu's Bagel Universe costume, just because I just love that sort of world of a little bit kind of sci-fi, but with tinges of something historical, with something a little bit culty. Kind of, I'm a big fan of like Jodorowsky, so like Holy Mountain, that sort of world. I love that. And just, I was able to work with fashion designer Claudia Lee. She's the one that made the plaid visor look for Jobu, but she also made the bagel followers robes. And so she had this sort of like pleated skirt from one of her shows that was like kind of this like, I don't know what fabric. It was kind of like almost like a vinyl plasticky fabric that was pleated, and I kind of used that as the foundation of it, and sort of it was sort of, I think we had like three or four fittings with her, because I wanted to experiment with like different capes, and then the body the bodysuit that she's wearing underneath, and I had that made, and then I had to like think about like the jewelry, and I found these amazing gloves with like crystals hanging from it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna integrate that into the bodysuit. So it was like a little bit of working with other people to make it, but then also like me being able to make a few things myself from it. So I made like her belt and kind of altered the neck piece that she had, and I don't know, it was sort of like a fun collaboration with different people that I've worked with in the past to sort of create this look.
I think the bagel outfit is really fucking cool, and how you've gone for that sort of look. I'm just trying to get a picture up now for myself, just so I can appreciate it. Having that sort of outfit, because it goes, it's weird in a way, because it's, as you said, it has that heavenly look. It has that. This is, we've come to our god, the bagel, and this is what we're sort of bowing down to, which is the center of all universe. But is even the having, it has that sort of the medieval scarf as well. Is, I don't know, it's very hard to describe how cool it actually looks in parts, that you have the whole outfit there of all in white, on top of that with the neck scarf. Would you say neck scarf? I think I've got that wrong.
Rough. It's a rough.
You could say even the pearls that you've got on, they kind of look like they're part of, it could be part of Jamie Lee Curtis's character. Like it's the pearl version of that.
Oh yeah.
So I guess that could work with that, and it looks quite cool. I think I still think for me the One Car Universe one is the first, but then this probably comes down second for me, just because it just, again, the intricacy of the outfit, and it's never they look stunning, but it's never sort of over the top, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the look of the you could see the influences and everything. You could see the influences there of what you had, but also it has that angelic look with the followers being in the robes, and I guess the bagel could be, on the top of the head could be they could be their halo. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
But I guess the more I look at it, the more sort of discussing and listening what you're saying, start picking up on the intricacies of it all and how cool it all looks.
Also, like the visor, that the bagel followers are wearing. It's also a little play on, like, a lot of Asian moms and grandmas wear these like visors when they're going for a walk, and so that's why like we see Jobu wear it, with the plaid look, but then for a quick flash she turns into sort of like a, like grandma, and so she's wearing it there. But yeah, I kind of wanted a little bit of play with that whole sort of accidental Asian hipster, but like grandma chic vibe to it. And also, there's something about, I think, that shield. I mean, you think about like, it's sort of like blind followers, the sort of like Handmaid's Tale. They have those like bonnets and stuff. It kind of really shows sort of that sort of world of being a follower. And so I kind of like the mix of that, of the two worlds, sort of like kind of religious cult like world, and also just like everyday grandma taking a walk down the street.
It's the more you talk about it, the more I'm sort of picking up now that if I watch it again, there will be those things to pick up on and notice. I do love that sort of the grandma visor thing because I am picturing in my head they have the plastic and it's usually like green where the plastic is on the visor, which just kind of makes me chuckle now thinking about it and looking at the designs. I guess this leads to my last question. What's next for you?
I usually, it's like, can never talk about, really the projects I'm working on, but let's just say right now I'm just like reading scripts and just trying to find the next great film or TV show. So I'm hoping that that should be happening soon. There, I have read one film that I really liked, and so, a lot of it is sort of the waiting game of like getting financing and getting all the actors lined up. So I can't really talk about it, but I really do hope that I continue to work on movies, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, where, either it sort of does something positive, like, for like showing Asian representation and showing the world that like it can be a very successful movie. I think this is the number one movie for A24 now, which is incredible. And so, whether it does that or it's, working with actors or directors that have like a very unique story to tell, that's not just, that hasn't been done already. And I just want it to be sort of creative and artistic and has some sort of positive influence in the world. So, yes, hopefully it will be something like that.
No, I'll keep an eye out for that. I think you made a very interesting point as well about representation and just this, as this film is very heavily Asian representation in it, and look how successful it is, and maybe it's hopefully people, especially high level execs or whoever, can actually see that like it doesn't matter what it says on the page. They can show people of different representation and get them into being leads and everything.
Yeah.
I think it's just important. It's important for people to see themselves represented in a positive light on the
Yeah.
big screen. And then it would mean so much to people of various ages. I remember reading a story about this kid seeing Miles Morales, the Spider-Man comic, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, he looks just like me!" Getting all excited about it. And
Yeah.
I think that story always stuck with me about actually how important it is to see people like yourself being represented in a good way.
Yeah. And also I think that, like, this story, like so many non-Asians, like, like connected with it. And, it also shows that like we're all ultimately human and we all are alike in many ways. And we can watch a story that might be about a different, like, demographic or background, but that we can still identify with it and understand it. And so I think I think variety is the spice of life, right? It just makes the world so much more interesting. And so I think the more we have that, and the more stories that we have that represent all walks of life, I think the better the world is. And I think that because there's so much like division, especially in our, in my country, it's like it's I think we just need to realize that, like, we're all human and we all want the same things, and that's just sort of like love of, our family, friends, and that, like, if somehow, we saw more of the sort of similarities, there would be less like hate and wars and, all this terrible stuff that's happening. So, hopefully, like, I think this, hopefully this movie will inspire people to just like try to be more kind and empathetic and accepting.
I think that is a perfect way to end this episode. Thank you so much, Shirley. I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Everything, everywhere, all at once. I believe it's still playing in cinemas, but it's also been released on digital in the US. Yeah, go out and watch it. It's incredible.
Mhm.
Thank you again, Shirley. Take
Okay.
care and bye
All
bye.
right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.